Our sponsor tonight is the American Friends Service Committee, which is one of the tenants of this building, a Quaker-based organization that does peace and social justice work around the world, and we thank them for that. And I was looking for some sort of just quote to kick things off about gamification, and I found this in revenues.org, which is a fundraising website. And basically, I'll just read it for those who can't, but I'll read it anyhow. In the nonprofit sector, there are a growing number of social game platforms that aim to affect real-world change. With a huge percentage of social media users set to play at least one social game regularly during 2012, charities are adopting innovative gaming patterns and techniques to incentivize giving and donor participation on behalf of the cause. And that's really what why people are here, because this notion about gaming and using gamification as a means of advancing the causes, raising money, increasing advocacy, and other sorts of engagement with your audiences is a fast-growing trend and a powerful one. So we'll get started in just a moment. What I'd like to do is I'll pass around the mic. I'd like to ask people to introduce themselves. And you can say who you are and where you're from. And if you wouldn't mind saying anything that you would like with regard to your own experience with online gaming, either in the nonprofit or not nonprofit world. And I'm sorry, Sean, I didn't get your name. I didn't correct Sean's spelling of his name on the last slide.
That's all right. It's a C at the end.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. That also has their Twitter handles for those who are interested. As I said, my name is Seth Horowitz. I actually don't have a lot of experience with online gaming, and being over 50, it seems to be a demographic thing that is a typical sort of thing, so I want to learn more about that as we go forward. Although I can say that I've been playing a lot of chess with friends lately, and that's something that I've become quite addicted to. In any event, I'm going to pass this around, so please introduce yourself, say what you like about your own experience or your questions about gamification, and we'll get started. So, Mitch?
Hi, Mitch Collier, and I do communications for public health arena, and I don't know anything about gaming.
Yeah, my name is Vicki Tate. My organization's World Peace Plus. I don't know anything about gaming. I have two teenage boys, and when they play games all the time. And also, with my nonprofit, I work with kids, and I was hoping I could do like a character development game, because some of the kids, they get in trouble, and I want to teach them how to be good through gaming.
Oh, hi. It's John James, and I'm working on a way for people to better get paid online for art delivered digitally online, and that is replicounts.org.
What.org?
Replicounts, REPLICOUNTS.
Hey, my name's Chris Wash. I'm a software developer and IT consultant. Pretty familiar with gamification in general, but I have to admit I'm not from Philadelphia, so I'm new here from Richmond, Virginia, actually, and working up here right now. So right around the corner, I decided I'd stop by and see what it's all about. So.
Well,
welcome.
Thank you.
Bienvenido.
Craig Steele. I'm with Occupy Philly. Kind of came in through curiosity. I do work in the IT field during my day job. I do a good bit of programming, but it's more database and numbers and not that exciting stuff. This was kind of fun. I got to put down D&D as my first game, so that shows you how far back I go into this whole thing before computers. And I've spent many an hour in World of Warcraft and EverQuest and a few other online gamings, as well as Facebook games and so on. Okay.
I'm Medard Gable. I run a company called Earth Game. We develop online games, one of which is called Earth Game. There's another project of ours called the Earth Dashboard, which is basically a dashboard of the Earth, which is, in a sense, the user interface for this game. my experience with online games was, besides playing them and watching my kids play them, I developed a game back in the 1990s, mid-90s, called Networld Game, which was the first online global simulation that allowed people, you all, to sort of run the world and not blow it up or take it over, but the purpose of it was to figure out how to solve the world's problems. So that's my background, where I'm coming from.
Hello, my name is Rabia, and I'm from Big Brothers Big Sisters of America, and my background is in fund development and fund development systems. And I do not have much experience in gaming or gamification, but I'm interested in learning about gaming as a way of engaging people, particularly donors.
I'm Seth, and I'm working on a game right now, and I'm curious to see how gamification is going to be, portrayed, and I guess I'm just kind of interested in learning more about the topic of gamification and how it's different from games and stuff.
Good evening. My name's Drick Boyd. I'm a professor of urban studies at Eastern University, and I don't have much experience with online games, but I've used games in non-online games in teaching, and I'm also involved with several social change organizations and do some community education. And so the idea of using games in a variety of ways is very intriguing to me. So.
Hello, everyone. My name is David Greising. I'm an author and blogger and educator interested in games because of their ability to allow you to visualize a different world than we're in today, perhaps a better one, and to involve people in the situations that can get you to a better place. I've written about it a little bit because I was interested in how it was going to work. I feel that this is the cusp of something brand new and very exciting for us. I think we're moving from games as a form of entertainment into games as a form of social change, and I'm really very interested in how that's going to play out.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marisabel Isol. I'm the president of a very small women's group, Latino women's group in Upper Darby. And we try to work with the Latino immigrants in the area. And I'm here to learn. This is the first time I've ever heard the word gamification. So you know how up to date I am with this. So, and anything that we can help our organization, I'm willing to learn and see how we can use it to help us. So thank you.
Hi, I'm Greg. I'm just here by myself. Let's see. I've been in gaming since the Apple II Plus and played many online social games, but interested to find out how it affects nonprofits and social awareness. Thanks.
Well, this might be a little bit different, but I was.
What's your name?
And my name is Mina Menkes. Very easy to find me on Facebook. First one up on the top there. I was in art when I was at University of Penn, but I got knocked down on that. My most recent knockdown, was about 10 years ago when I was coming back from a programming class from Montgomery County, and I got hit. I had got a brain injury, and nobody wanted to take responsibility. I said that it was a bad intersection. I was ready to drive for the school district. Well, anyway, I have a friend who plays games with coupons. And I feel like for the people that I want to do something like SEPTA did, and after 6 years, they finally won, $270 million. And I feel like the people that can't, throw money down because, they might not be as... I thought maybe I have all kind of products. I have no idea what these got-to-be's are, but the younger generation does. And people who have children probably would be interested. But I just want to make a lot of money because I need justice for my mother and I need justice for me because a lot of my circumstances have become like una indocumentada. I think you know what I mean. Because and they play with the government. This government plays not just with people who are immigrants. They play with people who are here, who are paid, who worked for years and pay taxes. People who have paid insurance, whether it's on their homes, on their health, on their whatever insurance, car insurance.
Okay, thank you, Mina. I hate to interrupt, but I think we have to keep moving.
I am finished. I'm saying I have all kind of products, and I would like to be involved in a game because I've been gamed, and I want to play a game, and I want the game to be about money because money is what's going to help me get, and I'm not getting any younger. Okay, gracias a todos.
Thank you, Mina.
Hello. Hello, my name is Carter Belmont. I'm from PCAT, which is Philadelphia Center for Arts and Technology. I'm here to learn more about gamification and how we can use it with our social networking initiative.
I'm Eric Van Buskirk. I do freelance work with social media and internet marketing. And it just occurred to me now, the first experience I had with games and the digital realm was I did a partnership with Hasbro in 1999 when I was working for the biggest online community provider back then. And it was, I forgot about this, it was very interesting because the forums for these digital games became the most popular forums on the internet. More popular than any online communities for baseball, for example, during the summer when we set this up with Hasbro. So I think it says a lot about how enthusiastic people are about games. We'd like to think, for example, that maybe baseball and the Phillies, people are more passionate about that than anything else. But, you know, if that was any measure, that this forum about digital, CD-ROM games and that kind of thing could be more... people can be more virulently fascinated about talking and engaging in there than about baseball. That says a lot about how much people love to game. So anyway.
I'm Paul Bloor. I'm the executive assistant at William Way LGBT Community Center. Because we are a community center, we do, by nature, have a social following that engages with us and with one another. And so it seems to me like gaming is a way for them to engage with one another while including us in that circle. And personally, I've avoided gaming, but have become addicted to Foursquare. So I think gaming is a great way to addict people and get them engaged.
Hi, good evening. My name is Chana Blake, and I'm a self-employed nonprofit consultant. I work with smaller nonprofits in the city to consult with their grant writing and donor stewardship and a variety of tools for fundraising. But I've been coming to NetSquared for a couple years now, and actually it's where Paul and I met. And I also don't personally game, but of the NetSquareds I've come to, I've always found wonderful ideas that help sprouted other projects and things that I take back to my clients that have worked out well. So I just am coming to hear what's going on. I'm also on Foursquare, but I realize I only checked in like 2 or 3 places regularly, so I've kind of shied away from it, but thanks.
Hi, I'm Dorothy Lemansky from the Philadelphia Academies, Inc. I don't personally have any experience with gaming, but we're trying to figure out how to use it in the work that we're doing in terms of building systems, tools, and strategies for preparing young people for college and career once they graduate.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Jay Vasquez, also with the Philadelphia Academies, and I think I wrote down that I grew up loving to play baseball as opposed to gaming, so a totally different generation, right? And played 12, 13 hours a day of baseball. So also Philadelphia Academies, and we're looking at digital badging as a way of promoting 21st century education, skill development. So I'm interested in gaming and gamification as a way of us connecting with digital badging. So thank you. Digital badging. So it's a whole other subject, so we don't need to cover it.
Hi, my name is Andrew Sather. I work for a private law library on Knapp and Chestnut called Jenkins Law Library, and I have no experience with gamification for nonprofits, but I've read a lot about gamification for-profits with a lot of interest. And I think based on what I've read, we're all involved in a lot more gamification than perhaps we realize, including the people who said, I don't game. I think we're involved a lot more than we realize, and I'm very interested to hear more about it. So.
Hi, I'm Fitz Putnam. I'm a fair cameraman and an on-again, off-again gamer. I'm a little suspicious of gamification, but I'm eager to find out more.
Why suspicious?
If you're making something into a game, I don't know.
That's a theme.
I was going to play it already.
Sure. Hi, my name is Michael Gagne. I'm with Envision Peace Museum, and gaming-wise, I feel like there's a bunch of stuff, but I'm not thinking of it at the moment. Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. There's a wide diversity of backgrounds here, a wide diversity of experience with gaming and interest in gaming for different purposes. So I'm going to hand this over to Nathan and Sean. But in the meantime, what I want you to do is, as we're going through this, think about how this stuff might apply to your own situation. And when we have the time for discussion afterwards, and there's going to be a lot of time for that, Nathan and Sean are particularly interested in hearing about your specific situations and talking about, as a group, how we might be able to think of gaming as applying to those things. So you have an opportunity not only to ask questions and understand the field a little bit better, but maybe to have some of your own personal motivations and applications discussed in greater detail. So I'm going to hand this over to Nathan and Sean, who are going to introduce themselves, and we're off.
Okay. Hi, I'm Nathan, and I'll just say a couple of words on definition of gamification to start, and then I'll hand off to Sean, who's going to get some more into balance of things, and before I get back into again, general conversation about what the Game Lab's doing and some other stuff we've been up to in the area. But just in terms of definition of gamification, gamification is, you can look at it two ways. And one perspective has been brought up, which is that it's saying things are games and are fun when they're no fun at all, and just kind of slapping some game icing on the on something extremely unappealing and saying, now it's gamified, now you'll like it. And people have done this. There have been a bunch of initiatives where they've said, now we've made it like a game. We've added badges, saying badges, there are really good uses of badges and really fantastic initiatives like what Hive New York City and Mozilla Foundation's doing with open badges that are really effective in micro-certification, really cool things. But gamers, there's been a little bit of a battle on the idea of gamification. Gamers have not liked it so much because they haven't liked the idea of something that's not a game being called a game, or an implication that it's going to be fun. Now, I specifically suggested to Seth that we talk about gamification as opposed to gamification end games because there's a split. Gamification is really the idea of bringing kind of functional human elements to other processes. Like in games, there's an expectation that a human being will sit down, start a game, have some satisfactory process where they'll advance naturally. That's, I think, a really good thing to bring from games into places like enterprise software where, there's in the past, you could take a day of training in software, and that was acceptable. And I think that gamification is sort of a rejection of that idea, and a lot more a leaning toward human-based interaction and better design functionality. So as we look at gamification, it's really kind of what does a human want to do? And when you're interacting with humans and they want to advance, they want to reach next levels, a lot of that is already happening in games. So a lot of folks have slapped on the title gamification, which is sort of an ugly word, but by the time anyone noticed it was so ugly, the concept had really taken hold and there was no way. And actually there's some guys out of a neat project in Pittsburgh, and they like playification as the kind of the fix for that. Both because gamification should be gamification, if you read it, and play says it's not really a game, but it's like a human interaction of play and human interaction of going forward in it. So I think those are the cool things that we can explore is like, how does a human being interact with software in a way that's sort of like play and learning? So either for learning or to go in a direction or to advance. So that's why I think gamification is really neat and really important right now and why it reaches into a lot of things. So that's the nature. there's also serious games, which is kind of a conventional game made for a specific purpose generally. So a serious game, which is a lot of, is for social good, but it'll teach a lesson. Like it'll be a game that you'll play and you'll say, in this game, if I use all the oil, I die. That's a hard dynamic to make work, and there hasn't been really broad success in that. So I think that's a really different conversation to have is, what does a serious game do? How does it have value? And they do, but it's a really totally different sort of values. That's why we're not going to be talking about games that are specifically to teach a lesson for social good or change, and those do exist, and that's a whole other category and a whole other conversation. But so that's all I wanted to do was kind of lay down the definition, and then pass it off to you, Sean, for now.
I'm glad you clarified that, too, because I was actually going to reference a couple of games, but now I know not to touch it.
Well, you can touch it. No, feel free. I'm just...
First I'll introduce myself. My name is Sean Steinmark. I am CEO and founder of PS Give, which what we do is we're basically trying to gamify cause marketing, if the nonprofit folks here are into that. By the way, if you see me on my computer, I'm like tweeting and following along. It's how I take notes. So let's pop this and go to the beginning. So PS Give, I founded it about 2 years ago. The original goal was to try to raise awareness and revenue for nonprofits, trying to reach a broader sector. Most nonprofits we found focused in on the very wealthy individuals, a smaller number of individuals that had a lot of money. It's the easy, fast way to get the cash, rather than trying to reach a broader audience. My co-founder and I started looking into different ways that we could try to reach the broader audience, and sort of came across the concept of gamification and what was going on at the time with Zynga and Farmville. Has anybody here played Farmville? Well, a couple of people. Okay. So I had to play Farmville, and I had to play Mafia Wars for about 3 months to learn how it all worked, which drove me crazy, and then I was addicted for another 3 months. So I highly recommend you not start playing. What we basically do now is we sort of merged everything together to reward people, reward supporters for interacting with charities and interacting with for-profit brands that are supporting those charities. I'm going to blow through a lot of this presentation because I'm not going to bore you with specific things, but everything in our site is based around trying to win a prize, trying to win some product provided by our brand partners. So, for example, we had an event that happened with Broadway's Rock of Ages, where we were giving away tickets and backstage passes to the show, Broadway show, worth like $2,000. People were competing for this. In order to compete, they had to have reward credits. The way they earn those reward credits is liking a company or a charity on Facebook, sharing something on Twitter. Social networking activities that you want people to do and engage get rewarded with these points that they then use to try and compete for a product. So it's sort of all twists around, and it is getting people to do things to try to win something. But really, anybody can choose to unlike a charity. They can choose not to share. They choose what they want to do. And it's really a good way to engage your public. Oh, I didn't want to show that at first. All right, well, too bad. I was going to have you guys try to guess how much the value of a like would be. Anybody who might not have seen it. Anybody want to throw out some numbers? All right. So it's what the value has been placed on by those in the social media world. You can see the values here are kind of shocking. $8 for a Facebook like. And a lot of this is on a for-profit side. I haven't seen any statistics on the nonprofit world. There's a great statistic out there that across major retailers like Best Buy, Amazon, I think Target as well, a Facebook liker is will spend twice as much. I think it's actually twice or 2.5 as much as a non-liker in their stores. A friend of a Facebook liker, so not just the likers, the friend of the Facebook liker is also more likely to spend 2 times as much as a person who does not like or is not friends with somebody who likes that company on Facebook. Thinking about that from your nonprofit perspective, people are much more likely to donate and to get involved with support if they like you on Facebook, if they follow you on Twitter, if they're engaging on Instagram, which is another thing that we work on.
What's the source again? It's very interesting.
So the source I had quoted when I put this together for another presentation was, it was actually in PC Mag, which was kind of what I felt was the more mainstream publication to quote.
Is it a study or something? Because this is awfully...
Yeah, so actually, if you want, I can actually get you. It's in a couple of different places. PC Mag put it together the best.
Cool.
Some of it is based on, like, the Twitter stuff is based on what Twitter charges for promoted tweets.
Yeah.
So they actually charge companies to do that. The Facebook likes and shares are based on what companies see as the purchasing power behind it. Now, this will change dramatically. I mean, if your average donation is $100 versus $5, obviously the likes are a different value. So in general, what we're doing is we're rewarding people for this activity that you want to try to encourage, the liking. You know, somebody had mentioned that they're trying to figure out how to gamify social networking. I mean, this is what you're trying to do. We also have a Facebook app, not to talk too much about PS Give, but we have an app in there that actually right from the Facebook page for a charity or for a for-profit partner, people are encouraged right away. The view has changed, but win with PS Give, if they like your page, they get free credits to then go and try to win stuff. So right away on your page, you're incentivizing people to try to engage with you. And the other aspect of our site that we're rolling out soon is that when people make purchases online through PS Give, and it's all through major retailers, just clicking through, they'll earn rewards. So simply by clicking through to Best Buy and making a purchase the same way they would have otherwise, they'll get 5% of their purchase price back in these credits to then go and try to win prizes. The alternative they can also do is donate that 5% to charity if they prefer not to gamify themselves. We think more people are going to try to use it to win the prizes. And that, in a very brief nutshell, because I didn't want to spend too much time on my company, is PS Give. Another quick background on myself. I'm actually based out in New York. I'm down in Philadelphia, though, for a summer participating in Good Company Ventures, which is a social good startup accelerator or incubator, or for people who don't know what either of those words mean, it's basically an organization that helps startups along to try to really push us through and help us focus on the business model. Everybody involved in the program is trying to do some level of social change, and there are actually 3 of us that are involved in the gamification world. So you can see 3 out of the 13, gamification is really kind of up and coming. Any questions? I'm going to talk a little fast for folks. It's the New York and trying to get through. And hi, everybody at home. Okay.
All right, so I'm the founder of Philadelphia Game Lab, which is a nonprofit organization in Philadelphia, and that will be our space in September. Our focus is on facilitating small team game development, and a few things came together both in the game industry and in Philadelphia that we felt really made it the right time for this sort of project here. So basically, find a lot more people want to stay here. A lot more people out of the universities want to stay here. In the game industry, there's a lot of interest in smaller games that teams can put together, and we've had kind of a lot of support from industry folks in terms of moving forward with what we're doing. And I'll be brief in kind of introducing what we're doing, but basically a couple floors of collaborative workspace will at capacity, we'll have a dozen teams of game developers. We have a few projects. Some of them are the Grassroots Game Conference we had a couple months ago. We have a variety of projects in education and economic development. A lot of what we're trying to do is create jobs and help people get ready for jobs. So just before we launched the Grassroots Game Conference, Pew made a very heartening post about their interest in specifically this sort of investigation of games for a variety of purposes. And being in Philadelphia, we feel that a good the strong focus for us here in a place that hasn't really had a center in the game industry is on social good, different creative uses of game development. And we see that both in the commercial games and other initiatives. So for our game conference, Knight Foundation in the city and other folks sponsored us. So we had good support. And we had a day dedicated to games and gamification for nonprofits. We also had, part of our motivation for this is the NEA announced that they would accept games for as grant targets for NEA. So we had them come and speak about what they saw as the art of games, and as well as people from the Smithsonian and other folks come to Philadelphia to talk about that. And we had a bunch of other sessions, about almost a week of sessions. And kind of that's a lot of what we've been up to. Our interest in facilitating gamification is twofold. One is we're working with a lot of organizations, and as a nonprofit organization ourselves, we really want to help everyone do this, to get everything they can out of games, everything out of the technical and creative community related to games that's possible. We also saw that on the commercial side, we got a lot of questions generally in the game industry about how can gamification help businesses. And we saw that if we could, in Philadelphia, help people working in games to create a gravity here so that questions about the game industry, about things like gamification could get answered, so the technical expertise would reside here, we thought that would be good for the folks working in games because they'd develop additional revenue streams, develop relationships, as well as just kind of for the local economy. So we have a lot of interest in facilitating those things. And as part of the game conference, we had a few people speak about kind of things that they were doing in games. So this is the slide of stuff from Hive New York City, all the people collaborating on the badgification system that Mozilla Corp put together, which is micro-certification. It's the idea that people can learn in little chunks that can be certified by a wide variety of different entities. So the slide shows like logos of the entities that are participating. And this falls firmly within gamification. These are entities that clearly are not game developing sorts of entities, but they're entities that are saying, okay, this chunk within this micro-certification program we'll be responsible for. So really some interesting entities that are developing chunks of things that do end up in gamification.
Nathan, could you describe what you're talking about there a little bit? I go to this museum and I take a little course and...
No. Well, in some cases it's that. In others it's just that they'll develop it either online or they can make it essentially whatever they want. It's they're using technology and open technology from Mozilla Foundation, which is open badges that's open to the public, open to a variety of entities that kind of are approved into the program. But it's really broadly based, and it's working to be more broadly based. I know in Philadelphia there are entities working on things. We're working with several groups in New York on a project gathering data on pollution and using this micro-certification program. I mean, if you're interested in that, we could talk more about it later. I mean, it's kind of, what it is really is just badge representing completion of a task.
Okay.
So, and I think, some of the stuff that I brought is slides from presentations that folks did during the course of our game conference, and one is kind of presenting the idea of force. Oh, no, I don't have audio.
No, we can just create
on
the screen. Thank you.
So let me see. Okay, so some interesting things in thinking around games too. Let's see if I can get this on. Okay, so Tamara from Xavier gave some really nice interesting thoughts on geogaming, which is one aspect of that really often brings in community and social good. So they're looking at kind of what it does socially. Games, there's a game of Pac-Man that brought in street maps. So this is kind of free mobile application of this, where they actually used people at a central hub that then would call out directions to people, so they would act as the icons in the game in a Pac-Manhattan game. There are games around use of cards and transportation on the London transport system. So you could gather all this kind of data and compete with others just using the Oyster card system because they have such a smart transportation system. And then there are a wide variety of map-based games that kind of just stake out areas and battle for your zones. Map-based games where you find locations and have to track, I forget what this game is, but where you're tracking kind of activities of others, slugging in maps. And a lot of the time, too, there are, these are created, like the thing we're doing now with some folks in New York, is a game dedicated really to gathering data. So you want to have gameplay functionality so people create data that you actually end up needing anyway, so that you already need.
What kind of data is that?
What kind of data? Well, the data can vary a lot. I mean, it can be like negative elements. It can be pollution. So it can be things like reporting incidents. So all of these things benefit by having a gameplay functionality to keep them ongoing. The thing is that you can't really, you have to ensure that it reflects the impulse of the participants. You can't really you can't layer a game on top to make people do something they don't want to do anyway, or that's not in keeping with the nature of the action. A lot of the time, specifically too, and when people are taking actions for good, they don't want to receive a prize in return for that. I mean, they like supporting the things that they're trying to help, but they don't want to see a situation where their actions are trivialized by gameplay, and that's something that everyone needs to kind of be aware of if they're kind of competing. And this is the augmented reality that Xavier did, and I don't know if you've played with this. It's sort of a game, but you can see what used to be there. So on your phone, you point your phone in a direction, and you can see kind of pictures of old Philadelphia. The thing about augmented reality is that it's a little kludgy still. Even on kind of the most advanced handsets now, augmented reality is a little slow, it's a little lumpy, but it's pretty neat, just an idea, and I'm sure it'll get much better in future. And here are things like, again, you're asking what kind of data, like this project mapping the locations of trees. This is one that she pointed out that's developing districts. So people put in different districts, form different political districts. And I'm not sure what the end result of this was, but it's just a neat idea because there is so much conflict on gerrymandering regarding districts. So that was pretty cool. And those are just some examples from one set of explorations. There's also Stephen Jacobs joined us from Rochester, and get this forward. And he has this gamification of collaboration, and there's a lot of gamification of collaboration. The thing is, everyone hates project management software, so there are a lot of passes at figuring out how to get people to collaborate better, how to get credibility marked better, and this is one of the efforts. I mean, it seems to have worked pretty well, and this has gotten an outgrowth of that too. So again, you get to a lot of badges, and badges have kind of inherent dangers, but a lot of benefit. And sometimes they end up not being called badges, specifically because of badge fatigue and that sort of thing. Okay, so it was this is Kevin Werbach's slide, and he's an expert in gamification. He was pointing out that much gamification is not actually profitable. Like Foursquare, it doesn't fully monetize itself, but it does provide a whole lot of data. So it's kind of the sort of thing where you're driving a whole lot of action and feeling out kind of what eventually will be of significant value. So the questions he posed were, where do you value motivation? Like, what are the points that drive actions? And what are activities that can make the choices more meaningful? question about rules. Can behaviors be modeled through rules? And that's always a question in games, because games are all about rules. So if you want to modify behaviors, can you put in rules that will modify it, or is it just not appropriate to the situation? And that's what, number 4 is what I was talking about before, is does it conflict with other motivational structures? Like, are you coming in trying to get people to do something as a game, and they're already intrinsically motivated, and it's just offensive to them, which can happen if you just try layering the icing of games on top of something else. So I think that's kind of basically the thoughts that my own thoughts and a synopsis of some interesting stuff that other people were talking about during the course of our conference. So I guess I'll leave the presentation at that and go to questions.
We really want to, Nathan and I had talked about this last week, we really want to make this a conversation, so we want to hear what you guys have to say and just chat about this stuff.
Okay, so first of all, thank you both, Sean and Nathan, for presenting that stuff. There's a lot of information there. So we're open for questions, as well as mentioned before, for applications that you might want to try and explore how gamification might be useful in a situation that you're involved in. So if you wouldn't mind waiting for the mic just so we can get it on the recording. Jay?
Thanks. Real quick question. We work in schools, and we're working with one particular school using Game Salad to teach young people how to create games. Have you had any interaction with Game Salad or any other type of application?
It's a game what?
It's called Game Salad.
Salad?
Game Salad.
S-A-L-A.
Game Salad. So, have you used any type of application with young people to teach them gamification or the use of gaming and how to develop games?
Yeah, that's like a big focus that we have is how to K-12 game development, because we're not as involved in as an organization in giving them games or what games they play as part of.
Right.
But we've explored, and our first level of exploration was looking at kind of some of the stuff that Penn's graduate education department is doing with Scratch. And they've been very successful in high-performing high schools. And Scratch is an interesting tool. It's been around for a while. So it's out of MIT, but it's been around a long time. It's not the latest tool. It also doesn't look so much like games to kids who are making it. So one reason that we're interested in using game development with kids is that it pulls them in to creative use of technology. And if they learn, on the one hand, kind of richer content development tools or conventional web standard tools, either way is great. And if it can get them in. So Scratch has that impediment. I mean, it's a very simple tool that a non-technical teacher can. And I know that also Education Works uses Game Salad, and they seem to really like Game Salad. I've used a little bit of Game Salad. We did an evaluation, and we've seen a lot of people actually go straight to using, with middle school and above, using Unity, which is the kind of the independent game developer software of choice. And we have some projects in course to make it easier for middle school and above to use Unity. And we're working with a few technology and kind of interface people to do some stuff around that. But we're really interested in that. And there are a bunch of people doing neat stuff. I mean, in addition to Penn, there's Drexel has stuff at GAMP that they're doing with game elements around music. And the school district had a project at Fitzsimon, and they used a number of technologies and had some industry support. I don't think Fitzsimon exists anymore, though. So, but
they still do, but that particular game is not being used. And I'm familiar with Drexel using gaming and music and interspersing the two and figuring out how to use that. But they're using it really with college-age students as opposed to high school students. And I know that Game Salad has taught a lot of the students that we're working with, you know, the discipline in developing games and the theory behind gaming, and it's fun because they get to develop the games themselves as opposed to having adults develop games for young people, allowing them to develop their own games, and so it's been pretty interesting.
Yeah, I mean, we've looked at Game Salad, and it's definitely a really good tool, and I think it's an attractive tool to kids. on the technical side, one of the reasons that we like, especially once they're in high school and some in middle school, like because there have been people doing really neat stuff, working with Unity with middle schoolers in Philadelphia, is that it goes right into programming languages that will be useful to students beyond just that experience, and also that it's such a rich visual tool that it allows for rich visual tools. So that people like myself who are horrible programmers, like I'll often be a room of people interested in games, and everyone's a programmer but me, and their expectation is, well, yeah, sure, everyone can program, and everyone, if they can't program, how are they making games? But we put an active effort into finding ways for creative people to be involved and kind of non-technical people or people who are not going to be purely focused on programming. So.
Yeah, it's a good foundation, and I'll just say this to everyone in the room: it's a good foundational tool. Teach young people the logic behind programming before they get into the actual physical programming. I'm an old programmer, and I mean really old, but it was interesting to see young people. Yeah, COBOL, Fortran, that kind of things that people don't talk about anymore. But it was interesting to see how these young people really grasp really complicated, multi-level programming rather quickly, and were able to accomplish a lot in a short period of time. So I was kind of interested in.
Yeah, it's amazing. Like the one program, a high school program, where the kids it was an underperforming school. The kids were achieving on the programming side. It could be reading. That's the really hard thing, because you expect that everyone's going to be self-motivated, and they're going to, you want people to be able to go and learn further how to use the tools, but that can be the barrier. So it's an interesting dynamic.
Thank you.
So this is a little bit of a theoretical question, but something I'm always thinking about. With anything that's using the social web or digital things that are social, I'm always thinking about, well, when should it be off of your own website or your own digital property? Usually it's a website. Perhaps it's something that you provide in your cell phone. Like if you're the Metropolitan Opera, maybe they have their own app, and it could be built into their app, or they could provide gaming on Facebook. So when it comes to gaming, because it's another form of engagement and in a way that people can be very social in an environment where they love to be engaged, what do you see the ups and the downs of doing it somewhere like Facebook or off of your own platform, it's called platform, versus putting it on your own platform?
So I think that you'll find a lot of people with a lot of different opinions about this. My opinion is that you need to be wherever your fans, customers, donors, whoever it is that you're trying to reach, you need to have things wherever they are. The apps that I like the best are the ones that actually follow me. So I was recently in a conversation with somebody about just something as simple as a to-do list. And my favorite to-do list to use on my phone and everywhere else is Wunderlist. And the only reason is because everything goes. So if I enter something on my phone, it's on my computer, it's on my iPad. So if you can have cross-platform games or gamification, that's the best. It's not as likely to happen for smaller organizations and for things that we're talking about. So what I would focus more on is where is the base that you're trying to engage? Are they on Facebook? They're not going to want to click a link on your Facebook page to then go off onto your brand page. But if they're on their website, they're not going to want to then click off and go to Facebook. Facebook actually has the ability now with apps to basically, not to get too technical, but kind of create a frame where you can sort of have a version of your website within your Facebook page. And that's a very useful tool to use if you have some sort of a game that you can put on your site, or even to the extent of, let's say you're badging. Basically, the digital badges you referred to earlier are the things with Foursquare, where I want to earn a level 2 donor, or I want to earn a level 3 supporter, and I get a little badge. You can actually now do that cross-platform because Facebook can reference back to your website, which actually is another thing down the road that we're doing with PSGive. So I would recommend that. Mobile is a whole different animal. You can still reference everything on mobile that's on your website, but you don't really want to. People that are mobile prefer to stay mobile. They prefer to play mobile. And if you are, if you're at an opera or you're at the theater, those folks are not going to go home and then go play a game. They're going to want to do whatever it is to interact right then and there mobile. And that's kind of my take.
Sean,
answer your question?
Yeah. The app you referred to as Wunderlist for a to-do list?
Yeah.
Okay, so where's the game part of it?
Oh, that's not a game. I was just referring to the fact that
it's
when things are cross-platform, I think cross-platform is the absolute way to go. The problem with Facebook in the old days was anything on Facebook stayed on Facebook, and there wasn't a lot of cross-collaboration.
What were you saying about framing? What kind of read about that in Facebook, about framing? Because I didn't get it.
If you go, if you Google or search for Facebook app development or app developer, you should be able to find it.
Okay, thank you.
And by the way, I actually tweeted the references to the sharing values from earlier, and they're with the hashtag, so you guys should be able to find it.
We have a question from cyberspace.
Twitter question from hyperspace.
All right, so this is a Twitter question. Actually, it's two parts. I had a conversation with someone on Twitter, and we kind of changed what she was going to ask. So the first one is actually it's something I think every nonprofit is interested in. Is this space a good space to do fundraising? Is this a place where we can we apply these concepts and do fundraising for nonprofit organizations and causes? And then I'm gonna wait a little bit for my second one because it's completely different. But I think that answer is something that a lot of people are interested in.
So fundraising.
Well, since it's part of your thing, I'll first say yes, absolutely. But I mean, I think it's been proven, and there are things. It depends what you're doing clearly as to who your audience is. I mean, if you look at a lot of small organizations, small nonprofits, I think in turmoil right now because there's been a donor benefactor class that's grows from their board and that's kind of aging out of participation. And a lot of people are trying to find how to engage the younger generation in that sort of relationship. And a lot of folks are finding that it's online. And if you look at some numbers like Kickstarter who say, give a number that they're funding more than the NEA in a given year now. I mean, the thing about Kickstarter is that a lot of these projects are actually buying something. So it's kind of like a pre-sale model more than it's like a donor funding model. But I mean, lots of people do premiums too. So I mean, I think that there are lots of proof. There's lots of proof out there that you can do fundraising. There are effective models, but that doesn't mean it's everybody.
Yeah. So I will say absolutely to the tweeter at home. I think that this is going to be one of the top ways that organizations raise money. We're moving out. There's too much donor fatigue out there, and I'm sure you've all seen it. And if I looked at my Facebook page right now in my feed, I'm sure I would have at least one or two people soliciting me for donations. There's just too much going on, and it's unfortunate because then you get lost in the clutter. So how do you reach out to that crowd? You make it fun for them. You create ways that they can enjoy themselves while they are supporting you, whether it's rewarding them. I wouldn't say rewarding for donation because that's a little odd, but whether it's encouraging them to donate by then giving them a badge and people can show off. I mean, there are three reasons people give. They want to, let's see if I can do it off the cuff. It's do good, be good, or feel good. And do good is just donating for the sake of donating. I know that I'm doing good, so I want to help out. Feel good is I know inside, and it makes me happy to give money because then I feel better about myself because I might be better than whoever I'm giving or whatever that internalization is. Then be good is kind of showing off. Is that the right? Whatever. The third one is showing off. You want people to know that you did good. You want to wear the little ribbon that says I donated money to charity. You want to wear a pink shirt to show everybody that you support. If I'm able to throw a badge up on my Facebook page or on my Twitter account or Pinterest or through Instagram and take a picture, if I'm able to show people that I did good, I'm more likely to donate. However horrible that is, that's the case.
To promote it, it's not just because you're showing off.
Yeah, well, and that is true. That is true.
And that's why you're wearing it.
Sure. No, absolutely. There are many reasons why people do, but I really think gamification, and I mean it's why PS Give is becoming successful.
Sean, can you give us an actual, like a concrete example of an organization that might have raised money using gamification? I don't mean to put you on the spot, but
using straight gamification. Well, actually, there's an entire website like Kickstarter that's in my program called StartSomeGood.org, and they are the Kickstarter for nonprofits and social good organizations. So
Funding Works is. No, just because that's mine.
Okay, sorry. Funding Works. Funding Works is I should throw this out to you. I remember I wasn't supposed to mention stuff. Funding Works. people are doing this now. It's not so much gamification for either one. Do people get rewards on funding work?
No, they just get they get credit for 2 levels of separation with donors. So like anybody that they send, that raises their value. But I would also throw in like Zynga. So Zynga, for a while, I think their first pass at this was they had objects you could buy in Zynga. Like everyone hates Zynga. Well, I think everybody hates Zynga. I don't know how many who plays it, but millions of people that nobody knows play Zynga games. But like they had an object in a game, and if you bought the object, you were donating to Japan to relief there. And now they kind of have this ongoing program where there are objects in Zynga, but if you buy the objects in Zynga, money goes to some deserving entity.
Does that involve shipping and handling? If somebody's
It's a virtual item. It's not a real thing. It's like a cow that faces left instead of right or something. And also Rising, there's a guy, David Gloss, who's local here, and there's a company, Rising, which was just bought by a bigger company, but it's staying in Philadelphia. And they had a case study where they kind of have a sweepstakes game, a game of skill for, and you know, players can win money. And they tested charitable giving, and they found that charitable givers added a lot more users. So the people that participated in this program were likely to spend more money in their system if they were interested in social good, and they were likely to add more people. They were much more valuable members of a commercial community than a conventional only commercial interest person.
I missed that. You're saying that people who are involved in the game
Well, I'm saying that people...
Lena, excuse me. We want to get you the mic if you can have a question, but other people have questions first. So if you could wait for the mic.
I'm sorry.
With Art?
So I have a question, but also an answer to this question, an example of some place that has raised money for a nonprofit, Food Force. Food Force was a game developed by the World Food Program that, you know, they developed and hoped that they would sell or download 50,000 copies. You know, it dealt with the complexities of the global food problem. You know, it's a fairly boring subject to most people, and 7 million people have so far downloaded it and played it. It's free, but there is an opportunity, embedded in the game to donate money to the World Food Program if you're so moved. And so they've raised a lot of money through creating a game that explains a complex situation, you know, about relief to people who are hungry throughout the world. So that's an example. The question I had for you was, I was very curious about, I'd like to hear some examples of cross-platform games. You know, you had mentioned that that's a very desirable thing. That's how you use to judge the value of your list program, and it seemed like that's what games are out there that use smartphones and the web and other things?
I mean, you have the not non-profit oriented, but you know, again, go back to Zynga. Even though, however people feel about Zynga, they do have it with games. Words with Friends is Facebook, it's mobile, it's across mobile platforms, it's iPad, it's Kindle, it's Android, it's everything. And that's one of the reasons why it's so effective. Do you have anything that's...
So I just thought, I mean, like, there's kind of casual social games because they don't have, there's nothing unique about a platform that really differentiates it. They can be every place. I mean, like, more kind of hardcore games, there hasn't been one that's kind of made specific use of each device. There was one about a decade ago called Majestic that Electronic Arts put out. And it used your phone, it would call you, it would text you, it would fax you, because there were faxing back then and stuff, and you could play it on PC, and it just freaked people the hell out. Because they would call, it would like dial you, and the woman would start screaming, and you'd be in the middle of a meeting or something, and the game would engage you, and it's like, but anyway, so yeah, I mean, casual games has been a lot of success in that area, but not so much in core hardware specific.
By the way, I realized I should have answered previously about the donating for games. Everyone at PS gives partners. I mean, that's what we do. We're gamifying the whole donation realm. So people aren't being rewarded for the donations, but money is being raised through the brand partners.
Yeah, I guess I was intrigued by the last comment mentioning Food Force as an example of a game that raise money, but really taught people about an important issue. And I'm curious, I guess, where does one? I mean, I'm not a person who develops games, so I'm wondering, where does one find games which can help people understand some of these complex issues? Because while they are boring, people really need to get a grasp of some of these very complex issues that are impacting us. I mean, I'm thinking of the fellow from Occupy. I mean, the issues that Occupy is dealing with have been so trivialized in the media because people just want a very simple answer. And in fact, what Occupy is trying to raise awareness of is a very, very complex set of forces that are impacting everybody in this country, but most people are totally ignorant of what's going on. So how do we find those kind of games that can really help people begin, in a fun way, to begin to understand some of the complexities of the issues that probably all of us in this room are facing as we try to impact the society for good?
A lot of people are struggling with that. I mean, it's like something that people have thought for a long time in games that would be, and there's a whole serious games category, which is just that, which is taking complex social problems and making them a game so that people can understand the dynamics. The problem is, it's really hard to make a game that's just fun anyway, and then you layer on top that it teaches a lesson, and it's almost impossible. The games that really represent life well, like Civilization or even a sharing dynamic like World of Warcraft, are very complicated, sophisticated games, and the people that play them already want to engage the kind of question you're talking about. They already, like, the highest saturation of PhDs is in playing World of Warcraft. So, like, it doesn't really make it easier putting it in a game. And though I agree with you, the game dynamic shows. And I mean, there's a great game about Middle East conflict a few years ago that essentially was just you were screwed no matter what you did. It was like, yeah, so you could either fight back, not fight back, but it was just going to continue. And it was just but how many of those can people play? And I mean, I meet a lot of people who are Civilization fans, but when I meet them, I say, you have an advanced degree, and they almost always have an advanced degree. And Civilization is like really sophisticated. It does, like, how do you build society? And it's like, but those people are already asking those questions, and they're people that you would be happy to engage because they're really smart and they want to play a really smart game. I think the question is, how do you get someone who's not interested in a sophisticated problem to play it in a game? And gameplay does kind of make it simpler, but I mean, aside from these like kind of proving a point games, I haven't seen like a really complicated issue made simpler by a game that then gets a broad audience. They tend to have smaller audiences, and so it's a really good question. I mean, if someone can do it.
Before we go on, Rick brought up the point about Occupy, and I know that I was speaking to Greg before about gamification of Occupy because it's such a widespread sort of engagement, but doesn't really engage a lot of sectors of the society. I'm wondering if Greg or anyone else has any thoughts about gamification with the whole Occupy movement.
Well, the idea I had been thinking about this would be based on a Civilization type of game. The idea of, completely remove outside current capitalist systems. How do you rebuild a society? And then all the problems that come up with, which we could then look at, the actual experience of Occupy to put together scenarios. And how do you deal with those? And then possible future analogies, it becomes sort of a simulation. Thank you. Idea of, well, what if this happened, and what could be the possible scenarios? You could get into where no matter what you do, it doesn't work out, or that starts to get into the framing. The game developer kind of decides, well, this is not working, this isn't, which becomes a whole nother complicated issue, which perhaps the game should be, as you had brought up, where it has an element that the players of the game also start to define the rules of the game as it goes on. So those are my preliminary thoughts, which I guess I have thought about it for a little bit, but that's about where I am on that.
Any reaction to that before we move on? Yeah, Seth.
Yeah, I think that's pretty interesting because there's kind of almost a contradiction there in terms when you're making the game and you want to be expressing like an idea of what people are supposed to learn, but it ends up like Civilization is very broad, and a game that's very didactic and trying to convince you of the right way to play rather than let you like naturally discover that. I think the challenge there is the player feels like they're handheld through the experience or whatever. So, but I think there's I think that would be the biggest challenge with a game or with any of these games like this. I think I remember playing the Food Force game, and I liked it. But I feel like I don't really remember the whole experience. But maybe I think I recall that it was kind of a series of mini games that were based around factual elements, but you didn't actually get to interact with the actual like decision making process or anything like that. But
Direct response.
Direct response. Some of those things, as you're saying, do give you an opportunity to educate. Again, the Occupy thing was not portrayed very accurately in the media. So it does give you an idea, scenario. Someone comes to you and says, oh, I have a bunker with a lot of weapons. We need to get violent. What do you do? And, if you react the wrong way, you end up in jail. You react the other way, you end up losing friends. Those are the type of scenarios, though, that give this idea of a game a chance to reframe the situation in a way that was never discussed in the media. How do you deal with infiltrators? How do you deal with insane people showing up? How do you deal with assaults in your camp? How do you deal with security with the whole idea that you're not going to have a security state, but at the same time there's certain needs? So there could be a number of different scenarios, and then that gets into playing these out and perhaps learning from that process that in the real world is both dangerous, impossible, never had an opportunity to play those out. This does create an opportunity to simulate some of these different scenarios and see how they play out. They might play out. I'm sorry.
The gentleman down here in the purple shirt asked what I think was a very important question about the games. Where are they? And there's literally hundreds of serious games that deal with most every issue that the people in this room would think are important. It could be climate change, it could be social justice, there's games on, the national debt, personal debt. There's games on, how do you, power the world with renewable energy sources. I mean, every conceivable issue that you all and I have a concern with, somebody out there has turned into a game. And the answer to the question, well, where are they? There's a couple of websites that have the lists of literally hundreds of them. One of them is on this card, which I'll give you. Big Picture Small World has got a listing of the games. There's another site called Games for Change, which is a professional organization of people who are engaged in creating serious games on real-world issues from, hunger to, climate change and everything else under the sun. And I would urge you to look at those. Some of them are very interesting and exciting. They all don't lead to doom. There's one that has to do with putting you in the shoes or the sandals of somebody in the developing world, and you've got to figure out how to make do on, $1 a day with a family of 4 or 5 people, and you fail, right quickly, but you get better as you play it, and you learn how to survive in all sorts of different situations. A lot of the games build empathy. They allow you to experience the world the way somebody else would in a different part of the world. So I would urge you to look at those sites and play some of those games. Some of them are trivial and not so good. Some of them are very good.
Michael, David, this? Okay, not just speak up.
Okay, sure. This was just related to the potential for games about Occupy or games about social change related to economic crisis, etc. I haven't played the games that I'm referring to, but I intend to check them out further, and I'm thinking of the International Center for Nonviolent Conflict and their website, nonviolent-conflict.org. They have a couple of games that are about learning political strategy, both for regime change, for overthrowing dictators, and I think a lot of the lessons, the strategic lessons, that can be applied to campaigns, even within formal democracies. I've also heard they're boring as hell. But, or at least, sorry, I heard that a couple of times about the first game, and then they developed a second game that was supposed to be a little more fun, and I haven't looked into it. So.
This is the ongoing problem, and Nathan kind of pointed it out. It's really hard to make a fun game about a serious topic, and the real issue is that those of us who would play these games are already interested in these topics. I'm almost as likely to read an article about it as I am to say, hey, this is a cool, fun game to do. With the Occupy issue, I mean, it's a very, there's two sides, and people either think it's ridiculous or they really agree with what's going on and understand the principles. The people on this side, the thinking that it's ridiculous side, are not going to play a game that will teach them about it. So it sort of has to be worked into some other game that they bring out the concepts, and it's just it's a really hard thing to do. My best suggestion is find a good designer, because people will be more willing to play a game that looks pretty than just like a trivia game. And if you get the pictures, you're good.
David's been waiting.
I don't think I need a microphone. I just want to offer a little bit of a counterpoint on what I think is the drift of the conversation here. When I was trying to understand the power of social gaming, I went on Facebook and I picked a game to play called Weetopia. And for those of you in the audience who don't know what it is, it's one of those cherubic kids, little avatars moving around, and they build villages for themselves, and they create work for themselves, and they produce things, and they learn how to take from their productivity and give to charity and support children in Haiti and a whole variety of other things. And there are 500,000 people who are playing that game maybe every day. And so we can talk about the complexities of games like Civilization and some of the other thing and solve the Middle East crisis or whatever it is. But as a practical matter, there are games that hundreds of thousands of people are playing every day on Facebook that all of you could learn how to play in 5 minutes, and where you would get an experience of empathy, which one gentleman was talking about, an experience of generosity, an experience of actually making an impact on the world, because you can see the kids in Haiti or in West Africa that you're helping when you're buying some of the virtual goods that are sold on the site, or you're getting credits that allow you to buy them. And so I guess what I'd like to just offer is the counter view that it doesn't have to be complicated. And in fact, there are cross-platform games where hundreds of thousands of people are playing them today and learning something that very basic and very important that they didn't learn any other way. And they didn't come to it because they were concerned about some narrow issue about energy or the environment or the Occupy movement. They came to it because it was basically a playful opportunity where they could do something that was very different. And I'd be interested in both of your reactions to that.
Well, no, I mean, I think that's really interesting. And I do think there are a lot of games that teach collaboration. And clearly there are a lot of functionalities in social environments that are oriented toward good. My point about serious games as a specific category is whether you have a game that in playing the game you learn a lesson. I think that the vast majority of those games nobody plays, or very few people play, and that's not to say that there aren't. I mean, I think the thing that what you're talking about is kind of the ideal in a lot of this, and more of that better, and that's kind of, a lot of that too is gamification that drives this. So it's the dynamic of play that drives it, as opposed to a game with its own internal dynamics that are so complicated and really reflect, either political conflicts or resolutions. So no, I'm totally.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. I feel bad for not thinking of Weetopia earlier, because that answers half the questions that were asked. It's cross-platform. It's a simple game. It actually is a phenomenal thing. Another good example is I don't know if anybody's familiar with freerice.com. So very simple trivial vocabulary game that every time you answer a question right, money gets donated to charity. It's very simple. It's teaching you about an issue, and it's teaching you actually learning about vocabulary. But Utopias I thank you for bringing that up.
One thing about games, too, I just throw in is that like it really does make a difference how many people play a game. So, I mean, there are some things that, some areas where marketing drives things, but in games, if a game is fun and it serves a purpose, people play it and it spreads. I used to have this conversation with friends, like a lot, like 2000, 2001. I wasn't in independent games. My friends were, and they would always say, you know, the reason nobody plays these independent games is that they don't get publicized. And I would always say to them, for like 5 years, I said, if you can get 12 good independent games together in the course of a year, I'll arrange for publishing and we'll arrange for all this to happen. And they could never find. The ecosystem's totally different now. I mean, from 2005, there's so many good games being pushed out, so many different sorts of games, innovative things. If nobody's playing a game, it's because people don't want to play the game. It's not because it doesn't have a marketing budget, because there's so many ways for a game to get out there. So that really, scale does matter in terms of if it can drive interest, if it solves problems, then people are playing it now. So
I was just going to say, you know, in its most fundamental capacity, games are about, when I think of them, competition between people. That's what sports is, right? That's what the old-fashioned board games were. It's, hey, let's have fun seeing who wins, one versus the other. And that's so fundamental to the way people want to do things. They have fun competing. And you can't compete, let's say, in the social web by,
what are you going to do, bragging rights or something like that? That's, I suppose that would be another way of competing. But isn't that the nature of games? And it seems like some of the things that want to educate people, I love the idea, but it's the competitive nature of a game that seems to win out in the end. And then also, when that's done in a very simple way, a lot of this can be simple. It's not as glamorous as what some of the things we're talking about, but to me, for example, Facebook, one of the easiest or the most obvious ways to build likes and followers is to have a sweepstake, because everyone likes to gamble and hope that they can win some money. So whether you're a nonprofit or a profit, I think, Sean, some of what you're doing is, we're not talking about complex games here. It's more this business of wanting to win, how that's fun. Just a simple win, and then you get entered to win plane tickets to Las Vegas or something. So I'm curious what you two think about that.
Yeah, I mean, the competition is probably the best thing that you can do, is form some way for people to compete with others, whether it's socially or like through PS Give or that type of thing. But I think there is value to a game that is fun, just pure fun as well. As much as people want to get out there and gamble and beat others at Words with Friends or Scramble with Friends, people also sit at home and play games that are not against other people. I spend way too much time online playing stupid Flash games that take me half an hour, and there's nothing in it aside from me getting points. So there's two sides to that. But it's
about social collaboration too. I mean, so it can be obnoxious pseudo-social collaboration or actual social collaboration that satisfies.
Along those lines, I heard a talk recently by a guy named Gabe. I think his last, I might butcher this, but it's Zickerman. Yeah, and like the fundamental point of his presentation is, gamification, whatever you want to call it, is about like feedback, friends, and fun. And people have taken it in a couple different directions, either being, on, I guess, the for-profit side, everybody wants to learn about how we turn our loyalty programs into a game. Like how do I, instead of spending my Marriott points on or accumulating those through just stays, how can we change that into something that's more social and brings in even more business? There's also the idea of not just loyalty, but learning, and then labor. So like actually, and this is the more interesting one, I think, for like practically making a real game, which would be like, if anybody's heard of the I hadn't heard of it until this talk, but there's apparently a freeware game out there called Fold It, which was used for, maybe you guys can talk more about it, you probably know more than I do, but it's used for protein folding, and they were able to basically solve a very tough like scientific issue that had eluded kind of the scientific community for years, just by kind of crowdsourcing the drudgery of actually working on the problem. And I think there are a lot of other games that, opportunities for games where even if you're like working, like doing, like cleaning stuff up around the house or office or stuff like that, there's one like Chore Wars or something like that. World, I don't know, but like basically there's a whole category of games that are around just doing like making laborious stuff less boring.
Well, it's been happening in real life forever. I mean, how many parents don't reward their kids with candy, or if they do something good, they get a toy, or if they do something bad, they don't. I mean, it's that whole reward gratification scenario. Remember, in second grade, we had a teacher that gave us M&Ms if we answered questions correctly. That's gamification. It's just you don't really think about it in real world terms.
John? Just something a little sort of on the side, but I recall hearing, this must have been about 25 or more years ago, about a game. It wasn't a computer game because there weren't computers around, but a game to teach firefighters how to fight forest fires. And the thing I remember about it was that it was only sold to fire professionals, so I never had a chance to see it. But upon thinking about it, you can kind of understand why that might have been the case. But anyway, it's an example of a game for a serious purpose that existed even before the online world.
Okay, Andrew, do you want to ask your second cyber question?
Sure. Yeah. No, I just talk about it. This is another Twitter question. There was, if I can recall correctly, I apologize. All right. So the question was about what. I guess she was looking for a reaction on what you think of literal games. You talked a lot about more abstract kind of games, but she's talking about literal games not in the cyberspace. So stuff like puzzles on a website, or basically quizzes, stuff like that.
And what do you have a reaction in terms of effectiveness? Is it any less effective, any more, as opposed to some of the more complicated games that we've kind of been talking about tonight?
Okay, I'll talk. I think they're phenomenal. I think it's. I think there are a lot of different ways that you can approach gamification and gaming and rewards and getting people involved. National Wildlife Federation does this very well. If you Google them, just NWF Game Facebook maybe, they've created a bunch of them, and I think they actually hired a company to do this. And they're basically trivia and puzzle games. A lot of them are focused on kids, just teaching about the environment, and it gets people involved. I mean, people love playing crossword puzzles. They love doing different things. If you can teach them while they're doing games that they're used to and like, it's a very, very simple way to start getting yourself into this sector. To the point of how to. I mean, nobody here is going to go out and develop their own. Well, actually, one person might, but most people in the room are not going to go and program a game. And your best bet is to find things that have already been done. I'm sure there are companies out there that can create very simple puzzles, but there are good ways to keep content fresh and bring people back to your website. Definitely look up NWF. I'm sure there's a few others that I can't think of offhand that do it as well, but I think it's a great idea. Was there a reason? Do you know why? If there was a reason that they asked if it was bad?
No, she was interested in implementing it on her website. She just wanted to know, is that something that, is it...
Yeah, I'd recommend it.
We've talked a lot about very complicated games, and this is something that, you're jumping over there brought up a good point about simplicity and all that. This is more of a simple solution.
Yeah, I think simple is better. I mean, that's why PS Give has the gaming system is a little bit complicated, but once you're in it, it's basically the cross between a sweepstakes, raffle, and an auction. Getting too complicated and really trying to push too much information out of people, if they don't get it right away, they're going to leave. So having a very simple puzzle game is a great way to start that out.
Okay, I think we'll go another 10 or 15 minutes before we wrap it up. Did you have another question?
I just wanted to kind of respond to that.
I think the one important thing to note though is I guess the flip side of creating like a simple game and just getting people engaged in games is that I guess the whole idea of things becoming gamified is kind of dissolving into how we just go about interacting with websites. Like there's a question and answer website called Stack Overflow for programming related questions, and it's become really successful. It's just they have like this reputation system that's built in. You get reputation for answering questions correctly, and they've been able to stand up like the same model site, but not for answering software questions, but for like cooking questions or like home brewing or whatever have you, like various other hobbies. And I think a lot of other websites are starting to build in obviously these reputation kind of features that you can build out or you can build up points or badges or what have you. And I think those are elements that people are going to see to become more familiar with as these things start to grow and get bigger.
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted to respond a little bit to the simpler is better idea. Obviously, it has to do with what your purpose is. If your purpose is to reach a wider audience and engage people in something that's fun and quick and easy, then simpler is better. I guess I was approaching it more from an educator standpoint, because as an educator, when I've used games, games have been a tool for deeper reflection, and so that I don't see games as an end in themselves necessarily, but rather as a means to a much greater end. And so I guess I just wanted to respond by saying a lot of it has to do with our purpose. If we're trying to raise money, if we're trying to kind of get people to become at least initially aware of an issue, I think simpler is better. The problem is, there are a lot of people who are empathetic, but out of empathy are doing things that are actually counterproductive for long-term social justice, and so that's where the complexity comes in. That's where the complexity comes in, and so I guess that's where I was coming from on that particular comment.
Do other people have questions about, or just want to discuss a little bit about how gamification might be applied to a specific situation of their own, or one that they're concerned about? Yes.
How does a nonprofit get on PS Give?
You just come ask me.
You're so good. Is there a fee? You're the floor.
No, we do not charge nonprofits at all. In fact, right now we're even covering all the credit card fees for donations because we're trying to figure out a way. We don't think nonprofits should have to really pay, just in general. So we're pushing all that cost to the brand, to the for-profit partners. In general, for those out there, if you're just email info@psgive.org or find me, tweet me. We'll talk.
Okay.
I'd throw it through. It's much less complicated and much less sophisticated than what you're doing at PSGive. But at fundingworks.org, we are crowdfunding just for Philadelphia nonprofits, and we're glad to add projects. We're currently trying to raise funds for Science Leadership Academy for their next year laptops. So if anybody, wants to come to the site and give to SLA, pitch for SLA.
Going back to, as I said, I have been a long-time gamer, and there's been a lot of discussions, especially during World of Warcraft when that was so big. Why are we spending so much of our time on this game? And a lot of discussion, I think, and this isn't really coming from me, this is coming from a lot of web forums and long discussion, but the conclusion is that it is a fair reward for effort. In other words, the desire to play the game is sort of a rejection of the unfairness of the real world. In a game is you do this and you will get this. You see somebody walking around in a level 4 suit of armor, they got it by earning it, and you know exactly what they did. They went through this same dungeon and they had to do it 18 times to get that suit of armor they had, and so on. Is that very fairness that people find rewarding. The accomplishment comes from doing a very specific prescribed set of tasks. And if you do those correctly, if you figure out the puzzle, and if you so on, you're rewarded. And in the real world, it doesn't work like that. as much. And I think that, I just want to throw that out. I think we keep saying make a fun game. Well, what is a fun game? A fun game is this appropriate reward for effort. It's not too difficult, but it's challenging. I think that's a big word too. It should be challenging, not easy, not impossible, just the right level of challenge.
Well, that's definitely true of World of Warcraft. It is really well balanced. It is really fair. It rewards collaboration. It rewards charity. It rewards a whole lot of things. It's incredibly well balanced. Like right now, it's kind of unlikely another game would be made like that, partly because of the multiple monetization that everyone wants from games. So the latest game from that studio, from Blizzard, is Diablo 3, that actually you can buy your stuff. So in World of Warcraft, you can buy stuff, but it's gray market from gold farmers in Asia who play the game and then sell it back to you, and go through other sites and you buy these things. So it's not always entirely fair. But the cheat is difficult enough that but it's interesting. It is interesting that that's kind of like, it's almost an archaic game in a way, because it is freestanding and it is totally fair and it's totally internal to itself. I don't know if there'll be another game like that.
Okay, I have a question about, earlier in your opening remarks you were talking about collaboration games, and I found that interesting, but then what really stuck in my mind was when you compared that to project management. Because project management software is, I find, notoriously a pain in the ass. Once you've got it started, it's hard to maintain, and it's just very difficult. So can you say anything more about collaboration with regard to task management?
Oh, jeez. I don't know, I'm pretty bad at it myself, so I don't really have much out there. I mean, in general, I think across everything, the best collaboration tools, the best project management, all of that are things that are cross-platform and able to be accessed by anybody involved on your team. I'm a big fan of using Google Docs and Google Apps for that kind of stuff.
I think, too, there are some project management tools, like internal tools like that are like game. I've seen quality assurance that's kind of like a game dashboard. Also, like project management like Trello, which is like really simple, and the way it passes back and forth has a dynamic, although Trello doesn't kind of rate. There's also kind of a lot of like thinking in agile project management that lends itself to kind of pushing a lot of ideas out there, how they get rated, the velocity at which they move through. There's a lot of ideas inherent in agile, but I don't think anybody's seen an implementation specifically of project management for a lot of projects, for large-scale projects. It's been such a great implementation using gamification that it totally resolves it. People want to use it.
Okay, John.
Yeah, on that topic, there's something called Asana, which I've just looked at, not used much, but that's a project management thing apparently created by staff at Facebook for their own use in making developing the software for it. And it's just one thing to look at. It's apparently simpler than most of them.
No, I think it actually goes back to that idea of in this case, it's not where your supporters are, but where your team is. And you have to pick something that the people involved in the project, that they will all continue to use it. Even if it's not the best product, if it's the one people will access, it'll end up being the best. That's the biggest problem with all project management tools, is the lack of updating.
Right.
There's so many of them. It's like you've been biting into different project management tools.
Okay, any closing questions or comments anyone want to make? Okay, well, I want to thank not just Nathan and Sean, but I want to thank everybody here, because I think we had a very interactive and spirited discussion that was beneficial to all of us. So thanks to everyone.